911 operators of Reddit, what emergency call made you quit or almost quit? As an EMT, I once worked with a former firefighter who left his profession and went to wait tables because of a 911 call. He was called to a house, but the fire department got there 5 minutes before police could. In the house were a dad and toddler boy. Dad was the one who called 911 saying he was going to kill the kid. He was so mad. So the firefighter is at the door, but his sergeant is not letting them go in without police due to the possible danger of the situation. He could hear the boy screaming those death screams of someone who's really in pain. After a few minutes he decides freak it, he's going in anyways and breaks down the door. He gets the door open just as police show up, and they find the boy basically boiled from the waist down. While they were outside, the dad is holding this kid under scalding water in the tub. The kid died from his injuries after a long stay in the hospital. The firefighter was reprimanded for breaking protocol and still feels like everything was his fault for not saving the boy faster. It's always the kids that get to you. Not a 911 operator but a doctor was covering an ER night shift when EMS radios in to tell us they are inbound with a patient who suffered an eye injury. I'm thinking since the person called the fucking ambulance it must be pretty bad, like spilled muriatic acid all over my face, or fell and landed eyeball first into a fork bad. They wheel her in 10 minutes later, and she looked completely fine. When I ask what happened, and I shit you not she says I got a cat hair in my eye. An ambulance ride for a freaking hair in her eye. Icing on the cake she was a Medicaid patient. $2,000 and change of your tax dollars at work for something that could have been solved at home with a penny's worth of tap water. So this happened a couple years ago to a friend of mine. She was a dispatcher for at least 5 years. She was on a break-in call. The girl on the phone was terrified and trying to stay quiet in another room as she heard someone breaking into her house. The guy who broke in walked past the door a few times before kicking it in. All my friend heard was this girl screaming into the phone, "He's going to kill me," said over and over again until he actually did. He stabbed her multiple times while she held onto the phone screaming. My friend was so shaken after that she took a couple weeks off to get help. Her husband and family was very supportive and they all really tried to help. But on her days off, she ended up killing herself. We think it was an accident, but she took too many pills trying to get some sleep and just never woke back up. I live in Russia, 112 operator. Once I had a call. A drunk man wanted to call an ambulance for his wife who had a cut on her stomach, and she was unconscious. He was absolutely calm, as if nothing terrible had happened. I asked his name and address. He told me everything just like in any other call. It was quite suspicious, so I sent this information to the police too. It turned out that he already killed her by the time he called me. He stabbed her with a kitchen knife 29 times, and it was just before the International Women's Day. I get to the office at midnight. Grave shift. I sit at my desk. I have coffee and my book. I'm studying for an exam. I'm going back for my master's degree, so I have to do homework during this 12-hour shift. I put on my headset. Dead silence for 2 hours. Coworker is behind me. She's listening to music. She gets a call to her line. It's a car accident. Nothing serious. I hear the whole call. It's resolved within 15 minutes. The music resumes 3:14 am. My line lights up. Close my book and start the call. It is a young man. I'm guessing no older than 30 years in age. I already have my fingers hovering over my keyboard ready to dispatch EMTs to whatever is happening. 911, what is your emergency? I say. The man is talking to someone on the phone. That is not me. I hear screams in the background. I push my keys to dispatch police to the location I see on the screen. GPS tracking from the call landline. People still use landlines? Wow. Then he speaks to me. Did you send them? Are they coming? The screams from the background are from a woman. He's talking to me. I think back to all of the counseling courses I've taken to try and calm him down. Assess the situation. Think. Sir, can you tell me what's going on? We have officers on the way. Are you hurt? Think. There is a pause. I hear something shuffle. I'm going to shoot myself. My heart is beating so hard. I think I may throw up. I try to open my mouth. and regurgitate all of my training onto the line. I hear the woman screaming. The gunshot isn't as loud as I would have imagined. The woman is screaming. Then she stops. I hear her gagging, retching in the background. I hear things fall as she collapses. I hear her screaming again, crying, sobbing. They have protocols for dispatchers who are affected by these situations. But I can't. I just can't anymore. I gave up. Rest in peace, John. When I still lived in my hometown, I used to volunteer on the emergency services department. Being a tiny town, there was no full-time staff, so people in the town would receive proper training and volunteer for it. 2 incidents always stuck with me. One was a day when I was setting up for a CPR training course for teens. The station was silent as I was working until almost every alarm suddenly started going off. Fire, EMS, I could hear the RCMP alarm going off across the street. The radio starts buzzing, and I can hear a Delta call coming for a house nearby. Delta being the second highest level. I knew the family, kind people. Mom had been downstairs making dinner, and her son was getting ready to go to scouts. He had tripped and hung himself by the kerchief. She didn't find him until it was too late. I remember standing in front of the radio in horror as I could hear her screaming in the background of a radio call as one of the guys was radioing in that they were coming into the big city with a high priority call. My father is on both fire and EMS and was there. He said that all he could think the entire time was we left muddy footprints on their clean carpet. He called my mom in tears, asking her to hurry by and evacuate it up before the family got home. The other is less tragic and more just nerve-wracking. Was driving in from school one day, radio goes off. I hear the words, "We have a potential echo level call. Prepare for potential evacuations. West side." It was November, and usually there would be a thick blanket of snow. So far, there was none. Someone, in their infinite stupidity, had thrown a lit cigarette butt out of their car window into a nearby ditch. Nothing but farm fields for miles outside our town, and all of it was on fire. It took the fire departments of 3 towns and some pretty amazing bravery to get that fire under control. It took 2 days, and by the end of it, 2 farmsteads had burnt down, and our town was under threat of evacuation for the whole time. I had a trainee get up and leave in the middle of a shift after taking their first active call. She had only had calls of people reporting things that had already happened and the like. She took a call with an active domestic fight going on over the phone. Yelling, cursing, screaming, threatening, physical altercations. She took the call well, but I guess she decided that type of thing was too intense for her. I've taken some really rough calls. None of them made me want to quit, though. I made the choice to leave because the professional environment was just so toxic at the agency I was at. I worked answering medical alarm calls for a while. Think help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Guy hits his GPS button. When I answer the call he says, "Sorry, just an accident. My brother and I just stabbed a hooker," and hung it up. I tried to call back while I had 2 supervisors listen to the call. Everything was recorded and verify what I heard so we could call police with the GPS location of the call. No answer. I'll never forget his name. I googled it for weeks to see if he was arrested. Still haunts me. It was 2.5 years ago. I quit a few weeks after. We had several dispatchers and officers quit after we had an active shooter where 1 officer died and several were wounded. Lots of media coverage and stress. There was a police academy going on at the time and lots of people in the academy dropped out too. It was rough. I had a trainee quit after taking a domestic disturbance hostage situation call that lasted for hours. She went to the bathroom for like 45 minutes and I sent the supervisor to check on her. She had a bleeding ulcer and had to be transported to the hospital. Quit the next day. Stress sucks. Not a 911 operator, but my little brother is a first responder/firefighter and he was on a ride along with our local police. This happened in August 2019. It was like 8 PM, if I remember correctly. He was bullshitting with the officer. In our town nothing really exciting happens when they get a 911 dispatcher on the radio. They called over the code and address and off they went. When they got to the house the police officer looked at my brother and said, "Have you ever seen a dead body?" As my brother is a firefighter, he's seen a lot, so he says, yes. When they walk into the house, there is blood everywhere. All through the kitchen, up the stairs, in the bedroom, bathroom, and ending in the living room. They found this man in his mid-60s in an Indian prayer stance in front of his recliner chair, blood all around him. After everything is said and done, he finds out that this poor man was cooking dinner when he felt like he had crap himself. So he went upstairs to the bathroom, where he then tried to crap and felt what he thought as feces coming out. When he went to wipe, it was extremely painful and bloody. He then called 911 and began to cry and begged the dispatcher to send help, as he is wandering through his house. As he was wailing through his house and saying over and over again he didn't want to die, he was bleeding out. He settled in the living room and he fell to his knees, dispatcher still on the phone, and began to pray. He had been dead for 10 minutes in this stance by the time they got there. From what my brother said, he had ended up pushing his organs out of his butt somehow. He had no family and his wife had died 3 years before this. I wanted to be a police officer, but after hearing this story, I settled on being an English teacher. I'm very sorry to the 911 dispatcher that had to hear the last few minutes of this man's death, because I couldn't have done it. My sister was a 999 Britain operator for about a year. She left for several reasons, but shortly before she left she took a call from someone in a burning flat. Basically, they woke up in the midst of it and couldn't get out. She listened to them scream from being burned up. She took another job shortly after. That's the one she always says was the worst one she had. Turned out it was arson, set by petrol. I'll have a look for the news story. I'm pretty sure I remember one. Edit. Okay, so first off, the fire was started with mineral spirits in a trash bin. My sister was not on the phone listening to the person being burned up. She took a call from a person that survived. She was hysterical, of course, but survived. However, 2 people perished. That was the thing that made her want to quit. My experience is limited to a smaller department, and because of that I had a supervisor that was absolutely toxic and would openly retaliate if you so much disagreed with them. At one point I was the second most senior person and found myself working overnights because of a disagreement. The job already breeds anxiety. When you're not busy you can't help but wonder what's going to come over the line next. Even at a small department I still managed to deal with pretty much everything, but the worst were the suicide callers. I talked down more than 5, but I lost 2. Both happened almost as soon as I picked up the phone and give me a name and a location, and it happened before you could get anything other than that. And you can't hang up the phone until an officer arrives. So as a dispatcher there's really nothing you can do but listen. Those are the ones that stick with you. There's some people that you actually help, but unfortunately those aren't the ones that I remember. Those aren't the ones that wake me up in the middle of night. Some people are built for that and can leave that at work somehow, but I'm not one of them. I ultimately left the job because of the management and just burnout and fatigue. I'm lucky that I did, because I don't think I would have stayed healthy for very long, because even now I can point to that job and say that the stress caused by it is what started my anxiety, and I gained over 100 pounds in 4 years because of the stress, inconsistent schedules and night shifts. I was lucky enough to enter another field and become a senior software developer, but I have nothing but respect for dispatchers. I hope all departments adopt policy of debriefing and a focus on mental health after active incidents for both the officers and the dispatchers, because for some reason they are often forgotten.